"Who let him wear that hat?" That was the first question the bank manager blurted out loudly, right in the middle of the lobby. He was referring to a frail old man in a threadbare coat, his hands trembling as he clutched a cap embroidered with Navy SEAL. The onlookers tittered. They assumed he was playing dress-up. But the old man made no rebuttal. He simply placed a copper coin on the counter. No one understood until a real Navy Admiral strode into the bank less than half an hour later. If you've ever been dismissed because of your past, you need to hear this story. His name is Raymond Boone. He was once a senior chief in SEAL Team, 3 commanding missions no one dared speak of, in places no one remembers. But that was a story from 3 decades ago. Now, he lives alone in an old camper van parked on the outskirts of the Chula Vista neighborhood, where streets have no names, and the streetlights glow just enough to reveal the silence. No one visits him regularly. The medals he once wore on his chest now lie undisturbed in a tin box beneath the bed. On the walls there are no family photos, no letters, only a world map dotted with a few red pins, each pin marking a place he once set foot in, nearly died in, or where he lost a brother. That Monday morning he left home early. His cap was straight, his shirt clean, his khaki pants freshly pressed, not because anyone would notice, but because that was what he always did. Boone walked to the bus stop, carrying a brown envelope that held every document he still had, a faded VA ID card, a copy of his 1,991 discharge papers, and an old bank account confirmation letter from 2 decades past. He arrived at the Liberty Federal Bank branch in Mission Valley. No one paid attention as he walked through the door. Not a single glance lingered longer than a second. Boone stepped forward, standing in line without pushing, without looking at anyone. The way he stood back straight, hands clutching his cap, was like waiting for orders from an officer the world had already forgotten. When it was his turn, he placed the envelope on the counter and spoke softly. "I'd like to withdraw funds from this account. I believe it's still active." His voice was low, hoarse, unshaken but lacking the weight it once had. The young teller, not yet 30, flipped through the papers and stared at the screen. His expression shifted from confusion to doubt. "Are you sure this account belongs to you?" he asked, and when Boone nodded, he turned away without another word. A minute later, the manager appeared, slicked back hair, red tie, an arrogant air of confidence. Tyler Green was the type who had never served a day in uniform, yet spoke of honor as if he had shed blood for it. He took Boone's documents and rifled through them, looking for signs of forgery, then offered a half smile. "A SEAL, huh?" he said loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "These days anyone can buy one of those hats on eBay." A few chuckles rose from behind. Boone did not turn. He stood motionless, cap in hand. Tyler continued, "These papers, they look ancient, and that account hasn't been used in ages. We have the right to refuse service if something seems suspicious." Then he turned to the security guard, motioning as if dismissing a piece of trash. "Please escort him out. Thank you." Boone did not argue. He simply bowed his head, slowly retrieved the envelope, and stepped back. But do you know what the strange thing is? No one in that bank, neither Tyler, nor the teller, nor the customer tapping on his phone, knew that the very man they had just humiliated was the reason they could live in safety without ever understanding why. The question is, which one of them will be the first to realize the truth?
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
The envelope was still in his hand, but this time, Boone did not open it. He simply slid his hand into the inner pocket of his coat, where the fabric was worn thin as paper, and withdrew a small object wrapped in a piece of weathered nylon cloth. The motion was neither hurried nor ceremonial. yet contained the precision only those who have lived on the edge between life and death could understand. Inside the cloth was a coin. Not the kind you drop into a vending machine or lose under a theater seat, but a hefty bronze challenge coin, its edges smoothed by time. On its surface, the trident emblem and the inscription SEAL Team 3 remained clear, though dulled by years of wear. Boone did not look at it. He knew it by heart. Only those who have held it know this is a vow. Not everyone receives one, and no one has the right to counterfeit it. He placed the coin on the counter, quietly, like a period at the end of all that didn't need to be said. The teller glanced at it and furrowed her brow, as though it were an outdated bauble. Tyler stepped forward, shrugged, his eyes skimming the coin, as if it were a souvenir from Coronado's gift shops. "Nice jewelry," he quipped, then turned away. Neither of them knew what they had just seen. But someone else in the room had paused. In the corner by the customer service desk, a woman was just closing her portfolio. She wore a charcoal gray blouse, her hair pulled back neatly, carrying the calm of someone who has listened to too many battlefield casualty reports yet still sits through the meetings. Her name was Angela Tran. She had once been a U.S. Navy intelligence officer and now worked as a strategic manager for a defense technology firm in San Diego. The moment her eyes fell on that coin, she knew. She had seen an identical coin 10 years earlier in a makeshift Kandahar outpost when a JSOC officer placed it on the table to announce a teammate's death. It is something awarded only to those who have done deeds no one dares speak of publicly. Deeds that aren't displayed on medals. Things only insiders understand. Angela took a step forward, her gaze fixed on the coin. In that instant, the surroundings seemed to vanish, the ATM's hum, the customer's murmurs, Tyler's arrogance, all receded. She was no longer in a bank but inside a desert tent in the Middle East, where dust swirled with the scent of gunpowder and sweat, and soldiers sat in silence after losing a comrade. She raised her eyes. The man before her silent, unruffled, demanding no respect. He simply stood there, back straight, hand resting on the counter as if holding on to memories from a world everyone else had forgotten. Boone did not know anyone was watching, nor did he realize that this coin had awakened something long dormant in another person. Angela stepped closer. She did not touch the coin, only stood beside it and nodded silently, as if performing an unspoken ritual between people who know that sometimes the right thing is to say nothing at all. Then she turned to look at Tyler. Her gaze lingered longer than necessary. It was not angry, yet it compelled him to step back. And for the first time that morning, Tyler was speechless. Because some things require no explanation, no proof, no loud proclamation. They only need to be recognized at the right moment by the right person. Do you think Angela will let this pass? Or will she be the first in that room to change the course of the story? Angela remained standing there beside Boone like an anchor in a room full of skepticism and indifference. But her gaze was no longer fixed on the coin. It rested on the arrogance of the young manager who had just dismissed an entire chapter of history with one thoughtless remark. She didn't need to raise her voice or demand answers. One short sentence, quiet enough that outsiders couldn't overhear, but heavy enough to make Tyler step back. "You just made a mistake." Tyler arched an eyebrow, not because he didn't understand, but because he couldn't believe those words had come from a woman in office attire with no badge to prove her authority. "What do you mean?" he replied, still sneering, as if brushing off a suddenly over-serious mood. Angela did not answer immediately. She tilted her head toward Boone, not only to introduce him, but as if marking a new boundary in the room. An invisible line began to separate two worlds, the world of the uninformed and the world of those who had served. "He is a living legend," she said, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "and you just mock something you can't begin to understand." Tyler laughed, a quiet laugh, but sharp enough to cut into a person's pride. If he's so important, why is he alone, dressed like a homeless man, coming here to withdraw a few coins from an almost empty bank? Angela remained silent, but she slipped her phone from her purse and, without making a call, typed a 3-word text. Boone, Liberty Bank. Then she put the phone away and stood as though nothing had happened. Yet what she had just done would transform the atmosphere of that room in less than half an hour. She did not look at Boone, but he knew. Their eyes did not meet, yet something was exchanged, a silent command that all who have served understand. In the corner, the security guard straightened his posture. An elderly customer withdrew her hand from her phone. A young mother led her child out of line, as if to avoid awkwardness. But Angela paid them no mind. She only watched Tyler, and in her gaze lay a lesson he had never been taught. Some people require no medals to earn respect, for they are the very reason medals exist. Boone remained where he was. His hand rested on the counter, a short distance from the coin, as if protecting it, or more precisely, safeguarding the memory behind it. Outside the bank, the sky was still blue, but inside, the air had begun to shift. The silence was heavier, not apathy, but anticipation. Something was coming, not from anyone in that room, but from a direction beyond, more distant, yet more precise than anything they had ever imagined. And the question now was no longer, who is he? But, who received that message, and how will they respond? Dear viewers, stay tuned for the next installment that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to like and subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from around the world. In a third-floor conference room at the Coronado Naval Base, the briefing continued over the speakers. Maps of Asia's maritime zones cycled on the screen, but Admiral Marcus Leclerc no longer heard them clearly. Before him was a simple notification on his phone, 3 words he would never forget: Boone, Liberty Bank. He didn't ask who sent it. He didn't need confirmation. That name alone was enough to pull him from his seat. Surprised glances around the table were left behind as he spoke tersely to his aide. Fetch the car. No helicopter. We move now. The naval SUV cut through San Diego's crowded streets, flashing its police lights only once at each intersection. Inside, Leclerc sat in silence. He didn't need to revisit the past. It had never left him. Raymond Boone was more than a name. He was the foundation. The reason special operations tactics had been rewritten. A man the new generation of sailors had never met but learned from in every order he'd written. At the bank, time slowed, thickening the air. Boone still stood at the counter without moving. Angela remained at his side, her gaze fixed on the entrance as if sensing something approaching. Tyler hovered nearby, glancing at his watch not out of guilt, but because he wanted it all to be over. Then the door opened. Not with wind, not with the ATM's chime announcing a customer, but with a sudden pressure in the air, the kind only generated when someone steps in bearing a past, a command, and an unquestionable presence. Admiral Marcus Leclerc, immaculately uniformed, every ribbon perfectly aligned, his navy cap held in his left hand, crossed the threshold. He did not glance at anyone. He spoke no word. He offered no explanation for his presence. He simply walked straight ahead, each step measured, as if down an empty corridor at the Pentagon. When he halted in front of Boone, the bank grew so silent you could hear the receipt printer whir at the adjacent counter. Then, before everyone, he raised his hand in salute. Not a loud salute, no flourish. One decisive gesture, heavy with meaning, as though honoring a soldier still in active service. No one moved. Even Angela straightened her posture, as if compelled to observe proper decorum. Boone looked up, slowly. His eyes met Leclerc's. Party A. For a few seconds, Nothing else existed. Not the bank, not the paperwork, not the misunderstandings. Just two servicemen, one still serving, the other having crossed the threshold of oblivion, and that look said, "I know who you are. I always have." Boone returned the salute. His gesture was slower, yet executed with precision down to the smallest angle, as if his body had never forgotten the motion. The salute made no sound, yet resonated louder than any words. In that room, no one dared breathe heavily. Tyler froze, mouth agape but voiceless. The teller bowed her head. The customers fell utterly silent. Admiral Leclerc spoke no further. But his presence alone had changed everything. And with each passing second, the hush deepened, as though everyone realized they had not just witnessed a meeting, they had witnessed the return of truth. The question now was no longer who Boone was, but what happens next when honor no longer remains silent? The first person to break the silence was not Boone, nor was it Angela. It was Leclerc himself. With a slight wrist motion, he turned to face the room like a commander emerging from the front line. No speech. No justification. Only the truth. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his eyes sweeping over every stunned face. "You have just doubted one of the very architects of the combat curriculum we still teach here at Coronado." No one moved. No one exhaled. Tyler remained frozen, his face as pale as paper. Leclerc inclined his head toward the coin on the counter. His finger did not touch it, he held it just above the surface, as if afraid to disturb a symbol that carried the memories of generations. "Only 42 people have ever been awarded this item, and the man before you is one of them." The words fell like a boulder into a still lake. Ripples spread not in sound, but in shame. The guard straightened his stance and stood at attention. The teller bowed her head, her hands hovering over the keyboard but touching no keys. A young customer silently withdrew her phone and placed it face down on the counter. In the corner, a little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. Her small voice rang out, soft but audible to the surrounding adults. "Mom, who is he?" The mother did not answer at once. She simply looked at Boone for a long moment, then bent down and whispered as if saying a prayer. "Someone to whom we owe so much." Boone looked at no one. He did not need to. He simply placed his hand lightly on his cap as if to keep it from falling, or perhaps to remind himself that he was still standing here. But in truth, it was the gesture of a man accustomed to living quietly, even when finally seen. Angela stepped back a pace, but her eyes never left Boone. In them was not just respect, but something greater, a realization that without him she might never have had the chance to serve. That her life and the lives of her comrades could have been lost to mistakes he once helped prevent with experience unrecorded in any book. Leclerc again shattered the silence. He signaled to his aide. A small leather case was brought forward. Inside were no papers, no orders, but an object wrapped in velvet. When opened, light gleamed off a new coin nestled within an exact replica forged from the original issued to the unit. He once commanded, only a handful of which exist. No one asked why it was there. No one needed to. Admiral Leclerc did not hand it over. He placed it on the counter, right beside the worn coin. No insistence. No invitation. It was as if to say, if you wish, accept it. If not, it remains here, for anyone who enters this bank in the future to know you stood here. Boone looked down. His eyes did not glisten, but there was a subtle shift in his gaze, not of emotion, but of acknowledgement, as if something long misplaced had just been restored to its proper place. Across the room, Tyler still stood motionless. He wanted to speak, but his throat ran dry. No word could be loud enough to drown out his shame. No gesture sincere enough to atone for his earlier mockery. Yet he knew everyone was watching. Not watching him, but watching him do nothing. What do you think happens when a room that once doubted must now confront undeniable truth? Who will be the first to act this time, not to drive someone away, but to make amends? Dear viewers, grab a glass of water and stay tuned for the next twist in this story. Comment 1 if you found it powerful, so we know you're still here. Perhaps what made Boone look up in that moment was not the velvet case itself, but the way Leclerc set it down gently, deliberately, as though he were returning a part of someone's identity that had been lost for far too long. No one called it an honor. No one declared it a ceremony. Yet, in the charged hush of the bank, everyone felt it. Something had just been put right. Inside the case was the original sealed trident, a Navy SEAL badge, not a replica or display model, but the very emblem bestowed upon Boone when he was senior chief. It had vanished from all records after an unacknowledged mission. No one asked why it had reappeared, only that it had never belonged to anyone else. Boone's hand did not tremble as he received it, nor did he shed a tear. He simply stared at it for a long moment, then nodded, not in thanks, but in affirmation. I am still here. Leclerc said nothing further. He turned and walked away, neither hastening nor dawdling, but exactly as a commander departs after ensuring his troops are safe. Angela watched him go, then looked at Boone, witnessing, it seemed, the closing of a chapter in history. Quiet, unassuming, yet impossible to ignore. Boone stood still for a while longer. Then he placed the challenge coin back into his inner coat pocket. He folded the bank receipt and slipped it into his wallet, just as anyone would. He did not rush. Nor did he pause to look at anyone. He simply faced the door and walked slowly down the aisle as people made way. And strangely, no one had to be told to step aside. One by one, as if the commanding presence within him still lingered, they instinctively yielded. Outside, the sunlight streamed in as though the entire city were holding its breath for him. He exited without a waiting car, without reporters or headlines. Yet what he left behind ensured that no one in that bank would ever be quite the same again. A week later, at the Liberty Bank Mission Valley branch, a small bronze plaque appeared quietly beside the entrance. There was no unveiling ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a silent, weighty object, much like the man had commemorated. In honor of Senior Chief Raymond Boone, Navy SEAL, honor needs no proof. Trust requires no question. No one at the bank spoke of that day after it passed. They didn't need to. Yet from the moment the plaque was installed, every new staff member was asked to read it on their first day at work. Not to learn history, but to learn how to see a person. Customers, too, did not all notice it. But some would pause upon entering, glance at the plaque, and then step in a little straighter, speak a little softer. Not because they understood the whole story, but because they sensed something deserving of respect. And each year, on Memorial Day, a small bouquet of flowers appears beneath the plaque. No one claims credit, no name is given. Only a single navy blue ribbon, tied with a simple knot, the kind of knot that only those who have served know how to fashion. No one knows for certain who places the flowers, but those who work there understand. Some truths, some people, do not need to be shouted to be remembered. They only need to be seen at the right moment, in the right way. And you, if you walk through those doors, will you pause to read the name that the whole room once turned its back on? Or will you be the one to preserve the memory, so that someday somewhere else no one is ever forgotten again? When a person is misunderstood, what they need is not a loud apology, but timely recognition. Raymond Boone did not go to the bank to be honored. He only wanted to keep a small promise to those he cares about, just as he once kept his promise to his country during the nameless, faceless years. Yet it was his silence that changed an entire room. We live in an age when everything can so easily be forgotten, even those who sacrificed so that we might live in freedom and peace today. This story serves as a reminder. Sometimes, simply pausing to look more closely, to listen more intently, you can be the first to prevent an unnecessary forgetting. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a like. Leave a comment about someone you know who has served and has never been heard. And don't forget to subscribe so we can continue sharing the stories America needs to remember. Because some truths don't need to be shouted to change everything.